Daniel lived in a small American town where days passed quietly and life looked stable from the outside. Yet inside his mind, there was a constant storm that never seemed to rest. Every morning he woke up with the same familiar weight on his chest, the same thoughts telling him that he was behind in life, that others were moving forward while he was standing still, and that no matter what he tried, he would never truly catch up. These thoughts didn't scream or demand attention. They whispered softly but persistently, shaping how he saw himself and the world around him. He went to work, spoke politely, smiled when required, and fulfilled his responsibilities, but deep down he felt disconnected from his own potential. Whenever an opportunity appeared, whether it was a chance to grow at work, learn something new, or take a risk, his mind immediately filled with reasons why it wouldn't work. He imagined failure in detail, pictured embarrassment before it happened, and convinced himself that staying where he was felt safer than trying and losing. Over time, this way of thinking became normal to him. He stopped seeing his hesitation as fear and started calling it realism. At night, when the world slowed down and distractions disappeared, his thoughts became louder. He replayed past mistakes, focused on missed chances, and compared his life to people who seemed more confident, more successful, and more certain about their future. The more he compared, the smaller he felt, and the smaller he felt, the more he withdrew from taking action. He didn't hate himself, but he didn't trust himself either, and that lack of trust quietly controlled his decisions. One evening, after another long day that felt unproductive despite being busy, Daniel sat alone and noticed how exhausted he felt, not physically, but mentally. For the first time, instead of fighting his thoughts or distracting himself from them, he listened carefully and realized how harsh they were. He noticed that his mind spoke to him in ways he would never speak to another person, constantly reminding him of what he lacked instead of what he had survived. That realization didn't bring instant confidence, but it brought awareness, and awareness created space for change. He began noticing how often his thoughts predicted failure without evidence, and how rarely he questioned those predictions. Slowly, almost awkwardly at first, he started pausing before believing them. When his mind told him he wasn't capable, he reminded himself that capability grows through action, not certainty. When fear warned him not to try, he focused on what he could control instead of what he couldn't. He didn't suddenly become fearless, but he stopped letting fear decide everything. He began taking small steps that didn't feel impressive, but felt honest, choosing progress over perfection. Some days he moved forward, and other days he felt stuck again. But he learned not to turn temporary setbacks into permanent conclusions. As weeks passed, Daniel noticed subtle changes. His confidence didn't arrive loudly or dramatically. It grew quietly through consistency. He started trusting himself a little more, not because life became easier, but because he stopped assuming the worst about himself. Negative thoughts still appeared, but they no longer felt like commands. They felt like suggestions he could accept or reject. He realized that his life hadn't been limited by lack of ability or opportunity, but by the way he had been interpreting his own thoughts for years. The moment he stopped treating every negative thought as truth, his world began to open in small but meaningful ways. Daniel didn't transform into someone extraordinary overnight, but he became someone honest with himself, someone willing to try without needing guarantees. He understood that thinking differently didn't erase struggle, but it gave him the strength to face it without running away. Over time, he discovered that the most powerful change he made wasn't in his circumstances, job, or environment, but in the way he spoke to himself when no one else was listening. And that shift slowly reshaped the direction of his life.